Hi, I'm Mike Warren, and I am a professional celebrant. I also work for the International College of Professional Celebrants.
And so do I. I'm Maxine, and I'm a professional celebrant, and Mike and I are trainers at the ICPC.
Yeah.
And what we're here to talk about today, Mike?
Well, it's not always easy, is it, being a celebrant?
It's not.
There's some very difficult things, some challenging things, and it's things that we need to think about. So why is it so hard sometimes being a celebrant?
It is, and it's good to talk about it. And I think even if you've got a lot of experience, there are difficulties, aren't there? And the times that you get stuck. And I think one of the most obvious things people talk about is the emotional side of it. And we get asked about that quite a lot. And it can be really, really difficult, especially during funerals, which is the most obvious one. So have you been sort of caught out emotionally before?
Yeah, I have. There's been times where it's been quite difficult to cope within a ceremony, and you're there to do a job. You're there, your family may be trying to sort of get over their grief, and they don't want the celebrant actually, getting upset themselves.
And you can't get the words out, can you? If you're upset.
Yeah, I've had times when I've been watching some photographs that I've not seen before, not prepared, and suddenly it was just the photos got me, or the music gets you. And I think sometimes it's really quite hard and challenging when actually you are there to do a job. Sometimes you just need to pause and stop for a moment and then come back in. But I always think to myself, you're there because they need you. You're there because you're doing a professional job.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm quickly able to put my feelings to one side. I didn't know the person, for example, and it's really important that I'm there to support the family.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I always think to myself, it's not my family. And I think, if celebrants use the right thing for you to do, then you know that you have the ability to be able to step back.
Yes,
because you're there to do a service. Now, I found, I think it was about the second or third funeral that I did. The guy, his wife had been an actress. She was a really, really interesting character, and he chose a certain record by Glenn Campbell. And it was difficult for me because it was after my dad had passed away, and it was one of my dad's favourites.
Yes.
And so I found when we had it for the time of reflection, that I wiggled my toe. I wiggle my toes in my shoes if I think that I'm getting a bit emotional. I know Rebecca, who we work with, pinches herself on her hand, doesn't she?
Yeah.
But I think most of the time, you've been through the journey with the family, you've been through writing the script and the service.
That's right.
And so the thing is, you're prepared. It's not going to catch you out. But there are some funerals that are more difficult than others, aren't they, in terms of who's passed away?
Yeah, sometimes it is difficult. For example, if there is a family and it's a young child, that's really hard. It's a difficult funeral. Or if there was a suicide, or someone that has died from alcoholism, it's quite difficult, quite challenging, and you're there to support the family. And actually the families do get they're very upset, and you're also working through that sort of all their questions, and the shock of it can be very prevalent within the ceremony. You can still feel it then with everyone there, so it can be very difficult.
Yeah, it can be. And sometimes as a celebrant, we do like it when people say that it's been a good service and a very fitting service. But sometimes you can be there, and on the day there's very little connection, because I don't know about you, but I make sure that I look at the family. We can't tell them it's going to be all right, but even a look or a nod helps them, doesn't it?
Yes.
But sometimes they can't even look at you, they can't talk to you. When you're waiting after the service, they'll walk straight past you, and it's nothing to do with the quality of the service, because they've already approved it. It's about the fact that you represent the loss of a loved one.
That's true.
And then you've got to be prepared for that as well, for just to say, I'm just going to step away, and that's it. So I think the other thing about emotion is that we have to protect ourselves. And being surrounded by a really wonderful group of fellow celebrants, and having somebody on the phone or that you can have a coffee with who actually understands what you're talking about. Because if I go back and say to my other half, it was a really difficult day today, because he'll nod but he doesn't really understand. So I think that's a really good way of being able to
absolutely
do that. And we've got, we're fortunate, aren't we, at the ICPC, because we've got a massive network of really good celebrants. So there are ways to do that. But it's absolutely something you must think about before embarking on becoming a celebrant, because it can be a very, very emotional job. So what about some of the practical elements, Mike?
I think there's quite a lot of things that you need to be able to be. You need to be quite organised. I think you need to have ways of doing things that you can rely on. It's important to, you're guiding them, you're holding their hand through a difficult time. Or if it was a couple, you want to really make sure that you're guiding them through that ceremony. But it is important that you've got the ability to organise yourself, and to write and to get things organised, to phone people up, to make contact. So it's actually, there's an awful lot of organisational abilities there.
Yeah.
And that can be hard.
It can be difficult if you have, sometimes with weddings, and you're trying to, or you can book a wedding a year in advance, and then I usually pick up with couples 3 or 4 months beforehand, which is usually enough time, but they haven't thought about it. Then they don't answer your emails. I've got one couple now that are getting married in 2.5 weeks, and I'm only writing their ceremony tomorrow because our schedules have clashed. And we can't. I've got a wedding on Monday, and I had my last meeting with them last night, and they've they still haven't decided what they want. And so it can be a little bit frustrating, because you're trying to organise all your other celebrants' stuff and your personal life. So what it means is sometimes you might have to work into the evening, or you might have to work at the weekend.
Yes.
And that could be tough if you want other things, if you've got other things to do. So it is a challenge sometimes to be organised and get everything out on time.
You do have to be able to sort of flex your time slightly and adapt, because that phone could ring at any time with your client at the other end. They may be changing the words or the script in some way, or the organisation of the ceremony. And I suppose in a way you need to be flexible enough in your mind to think, actually, that's possible. I can do that. Even if it's at the latter stages, it might be even on the morning that people say, actually, could you say it in this way? And can be quite challenging, but obviously you want to make sure that it's the best and the perfect ceremony for them, and you make those changes. So it's being able to be flexible enough to be able to accommodate. And that's important, isn't it?
I think, and also coming from a place of neutrality, I would call it.
Yes.
We're human beings, and there are other human beings whose views, principles, and behaviour that we might not agree with.
I agree.
And sometimes, I can come back and say, I wouldn't have quite done it that way. And I wouldn't say it's hard, but it's something to think about, is it? That it's not your family, it's not your funeral, and it's not your show, basically. So sometimes you might find yourself disagreeing with something or questioning something. And it's, sometimes you've got to be really tactful. And then you can come home and say to whoever your confidant is, that was awkward or difficult.
That's true.
I wouldn't have done it like that. But you keep your lip firmly buttoned, don't you?
You do,
while you're doing the job. And I think coming from a place of understanding that people's representations and their grief and the way they want to say goodbye is up to them and most befitting for their family, even if it's something that you don't agree with.
No, that's very true, actually, because I think as a celebrant, you need to be able to listen really carefully. And that's one of the key skills, isn't it, of being a celebrant, is that if you go in with your ideas already almost in your mind, it can be very hard to actually, break off from what you want. But ultimately, it's not about you. And like Max said, it's not about your show, is it? it is actually about their show and making their day very special, regardless of the ceremony and what you're doing. So it's actually really important that you go in there to really listen and actively listen all the time. Find out what sort of ceremony that they want, the feel of it, making sure that it's actually going to meet all their needs.
Yeah.
And you're there to guide them.
Absolutely.
You're a facilitator in a way, aren't you?
Yeah, and I think the tough thing is, with funerals, sometimes you walk into their house and they can't speak. And there is a lot of times when you sit there for a very long time. And, the temptation is to say, have you thought about this? Do you want to do that? Because, you want to help them. But what they actually need is a little bit of silence.
Yeah.
And I guess, again, with weddings, have you thought about what you want? And then there's just a silence. And I think it is tough sometimes to get information out of people. Get information out of people on time. And it's difficult. I think one of the hardest things I think about being a funeral celebrant is balancing the fact that your funeral service has to be ready on time. You have to get things to the funeral, the order of service to the funeral director on time, without rushing the family. And the second thing is, most services, slots in the crematorium are half an hour. And when you've got a eulogy that's 15 to 20 minutes long, trying to have those very tough conversations. What have you found that?
That can be very hard, particularly if they're not your words as well. Or if it's a lastminute.com thing where it comes through the night before and it's from the family member, Uncle George, and you have to then deliver it in a confident way. That can be very challenging, can't it?
Yeah.
And I know that you've had one of those.
I had one where somebody was going to read the eulogy. I'd been out. I'd had a lovely day out with my other half. I'd left my phone at home, and I get back to messages from the widower, messages from the funeral director saying, "Pick your phone up, la la la." And it had turned out that he couldn't read the eulogy. He couldn't go because he had COVID. I thought, that's fine. I can read it. Just send it over. And this is 7:00 in the evening. I hadn't written it.
Oh no!
So I had to wait till he delivered it at about 9:30. Then I had to annotate it so I could read it and practice it. So that funeral wasn't actually sort of put to bed until the last minute, but it went well. But it's just sort of expecting the unexpected, really, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I suppose you want, as a celebrant, you do want to be prepared, don't you? So practice is so important. Feeling confident, it will help you to get over any sort of nerves ahead of time, because that's another hard thing, isn't it? Managing those nerves, particularly in the early stages when you're not too sure about things and you're feeling, maybe you're the first few funerals or weddings, and it's important to be able to feel confident and also for them to feel confident in you. So knowing your script, knowing how things are flowing is so important to have. And that will help your nerves, but it help you to come across in a really positive way, to be the sort of the guiding arm, and people will trust you right from the very start of the ceremony.
Have you ever had any families argue or fall out?
Yes.
While you've been with them? How do you manage that one?
That's been hard. I've had I walked into a family a few months ago now, and there were 10 members of the family, and I thought, he was obviously well loved, which he was. There was no doubt about that. But within a couple of seconds, I realised that they're all there because they've got a little bit of an axe to grind, and that was quite hard, because I realised that people hadn't met as a family. They hadn't talked about it as a family ahead of time. And I was almost playing pig in the middle.
Oh, that must have been
tough. That was really hard. And people were rolling their eyes up, and storming out and storming back in again. It was very difficult. But then in the end, to manage that, I just said, hang on a moment. We took a break, and I said, look, we're here for your dad. We are here for him, and making sure that. So I had to sort of say this, let's refocus.
Like get a common ground for them all.
Common ground. And almost sometimes ground rules are quite useful, particularly if there's a lot of interrupting that goes on, or talking over other people. So you are actually managing people.
Yeah.
And
we're all different. It can be
yeah,
tough, can't it?
So, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know.
I think another thing that can be quite tough is the business development and the confidence side of it, especially when you start, you're thinking, oh, I've got to go and speak to funeral directors, or when am I going to get my first wedding? And then actually kind of having the discipline to keep doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, I keep saying to myself, I've got testimonials from weddings that I haven't, from 3 months ago that I haven't put on.
No.
I know, and I just think I've got to do it, and I know some things like that I can be a little bit last minute Larry with them, but I think the driver, if you have a driver and a purpose, so for me it'll be, well, Christmas will be coming and New Year will be coming and people will be proposing, so I have to get it done then. But actually, going out and getting started and keeping going.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've got keeping motivated can be hard, because actually you're on, in many ways it's your business, you're a sole trader maybe, and you're working on your own, and you have to motivate yourself every day to do something that is actually going to push your business along, even in small ways.
In a small way.
Yeah, and still keep that motivation. And sometimes it does go quiet, doesn't it?
Well, we've talked about that. So there can be sort of lulls in people passing away, and we both had the same experience when that has happened, and quite often it happens over the summer, doesn't it? And I went to see funeral director and I said, is there anything that I've done? And you had the same thought, didn't you?
Yeah.
And they just said, no, nobody's dying at the moment, don't worry, we'll tell you when they do. But I just thought, because I was thinking I've done something and they're all going to talk to each other, and all of a sudden they don't want that. Oh no. But it's,
and you can get paranoid, can't you? You get paranoid if the phone doesn't ring, and did you do something wrong? Are they not happy with you in some way? And it's and that's not true. And sometimes I remember phoning up after around about 6 weeks, and I said, "Oh, is everything okay?" And they said, "Oh, it's just that the funeral arranger has moved on. Who are you?" Yeah. And then I thought, actually, I need to go and meet you. Another lady, as a funeral arranger, gave my cards and my leaflets out to them, and then things start to pick up again. So don't get paranoid. That's
and I think you do have to be resilient, and sometimes you don't feel it. You've had a tough day, and sometimes you think, oh, it's really hard, but it's not. But you just have to be really, really persistent with funeral directors. And remember, as Mike said, they do have a turnover of staff. So just because your card is lying in a drawer somewhere doesn't necessarily mean that, and you've got to go in there and have the, I think the last funeral director I went in, we sat and they gave me coffee and some cake. We talked conspiracy theory for about 20 minutes, and I got a funeral the week after. So there's all different things. So I think, I think we should finish by saying what a joy the job is. I know we've been discussing how hard things are, but I think it's just to raise your awareness that, it's like any other sort of vocation. You can have tough days. There are ways of sharing and coping mechanisms that you can. That you have to be resilient. But overall, what do you love most about being a celebrant?
Oh, I love the fact that I'm doing something that they are unable to do. The client's unable to do it on their own. Well, I suppose it's the same with weddings as well. Yeah. But I love the satisfaction of being able to be that person that can help guide them through a very difficult stage.
Yeah, you sort of provide their anchorage.
Yeah, and sometimes they don't know where to start, and you are just you're solid to them. Yeah. It's a person that they can trust.
You can hear them exhaling when you walk in, can't
and
you?
I love being able to go to a family, and they might all be apprehensive at the start. They might, not have a clue about it, and you leave them with such confidence in you, and that all their worries have disappeared. All they need to do, if they are grieving, is to grieve, because you've taken it all away. So I really love that because I feel it's serving, really.
Yeah, and it absolutely is. And I love the stories.
Oh, I do as
I
well.
love the stories. I love how you can walk into a room and we're all human and we judge, and you think you've got the measure
Yeah.
of the person and the family, and then the whole story
Yeah.
will open up to you.
Yes.
That just it affirms the wonder of life for me, whether that is a new person in the world, a love story. When I talk to a couple and they're like a pair of old slippers together, they're so comfy, that you just know. And then when you go and someone tells you the story, even for a funeral, and even in the most difficult circumstances, it can be an absolute wonderful thing, can't it?
It really can. I mean, just being able to bring somebody's back into their memory, and being able to spark those times in people's lives that they're grateful for.
It's been really good talking to you, Mike. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Max.
I just want to say that we are here at the International College of Professional Celebrants. If you've got any questions, it's been good to share our sort of experiences and thoughts, and hopefully we'll meet some of you on training soon.